Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Nuggy Guys podcast. Tonight, it's Sid, Douglas, Patrick, and we are also joined by our friends Kenton and Josh. Get ready for a wildly controversial episode as we all present our favorite conspiracy theories and then proceed to tear into each other over the alleged facts that are presented. Kenton is going to be kicking us off. Kenton, what do you have?
Okay, so, it's good to be here. It's September 2. In 9 days, I was going to say we're going to celebrate, but that's not the right word. 9 days is a day that we remember as September 11, or 9/11. So I want us to go back to 2001 when this all happened. And I'm going to tell you what I believe actually happened that day. And it is completely different than what your history book says. Now, there was airplanes that flew into buildings. There was people that died. There was people that got hurt. Those facts are true. But there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that I'm going to tell you about that I believe happened. So, we're going to start with George Bush. He was the president. And he was not that great of a president. I mean, he did some good stuff, but he wasn't, I'm not going to get political, but he had his flaws. And back in that time, there was a lot of tension with the Middle East, with the U.S., and they weren't, as good of friends as they could have been. So what I believe happened was that America wanted a war with Afghanistan.
Well, Iraq and Afghanistan.
Or Iraq, all those countries, they wanted a war with them.
You're arguing the higher-ups.
So the higher-ups did.
Probably for oil?
Yeah, I would say for oil, just because there's always been tension with them. They just didn't like them. But yeah, I would say, oil was probably a big one. So somebody came up with the idea to create a mass destruction in the U.S. to give a reason to go to war. So, and this is nothing new. You've heard it before.
What do you think actually happened on that day of 9/11?
On the day of 9/11, there were two planes that were flown into the World Trade Center. They were hijacked by Middle Eastern terrorists that were kidnapped by the U.S. government and forced to do this. They were forced to fly the planes into the World Trade Center by the U.S. government. The U.S. government forced them to do this. They flew into the World Trade Center, but what happened was there was also bombs that exploded as the planes flew in. Because if you look at, a building, like a plane hits a building, it's not gonna like the building, when the buildings fell, they just kind of they didn't fall over. They went straight down.
That's true.
So there had to be something underneath, or underneath the structure or something that is going to cause something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. That's going to make the ground rumble, or that's going to shake the building enough to just come straight down.
Okay, do you think you presented your theory well enough? Can we now comment on it and ask you questions?
I was going to say more, but...
What else do you got to say?
Well, Kenton, remember that the building did not fall over when it got hit. The building was just fanned for hours.
It was, right. So the other thing I was going to say was there was another plane that flew into the Pentagon. There was also another plane that was headed to D.C., allegedly headed to D.C. There's not really proof it was headed to D.C., it was just pointed in that direction. It had done a turned around and was headed back towards D.C. It could have been headed towards the Capitol. I mean, allegedly, if you were going to attack America, you were going to want to hit the capital city, right? If we're going to make this look like an attack from another country, let's attack the capital city.
Yeah, the official theory is that they were trying to hit the Congress, basically.
That they were, yeah. But what's very interesting is that whole day, George Bush was not in D.C.
No, wasn't he famously
in a classroom in Florida. So it makes my theory even make more sense because George Bush wasn't around, and I'm not sure where the vice president was, but I almost think I remember seeing that he wasn't around either in D.C. So the plan was to do all this, and then we have a reason to go to war. So yeah, the U.S. invaded Afghanistan in October of 2001. Followed by the invasion of Iraq in March 2003. So that's my theory, is that the U.S. government was behind this whole thing. They were responsible for this. They wanted a reason to go to war. I mean, U.S. government doesn't care about the, people. So they wanted a reason to go to war. They wanted a reason to cause war. So that's what they did. I don't think it went quite as they had planned, but I think that it was as good as what could have happened or what happened.
Okay, does anybody have any comments on that now?
Well, or do we want to let Josh present next?
No, we want to hear
I have some
comments now.
comments, but it more involves Josh and the physics behind this, including the allegedly the buildings in the videos based on frame rate per second fell at near freefall rate, which is impossible in that type of building structure because each floor is capable of supporting itself. So you would have to collapse down one floor, hit another floor, collapse it, hit another one. It would greatly slow your descent, right? Based on the type of building. This is per all people who studied into it, whatever. I haven't done a lot of study. But supposedly the buildings fell at near freefall rate, indicating planned collapse. Like, buildings don't collapse just vertically into their bases without a lot of careful, like, you have to go to school, it's a college degree, whatever.
Right.
To get trained.
Okay, let's go to Josh. Josh, do you have any comments on Sid's comment about the building supposedly falling at free fall speed?
So, my immediate reaction is that from what I have found, and I do not have any hard evidence pulled up right in front of me, but from my memory, it is true that it was extremely close to free fall speed, but the best estimates are that it was actually slightly slower. By a hair. It's close. It's close enough to, make it a worthwhile discussion, but it is close. It's slightly more. It makes me immediately skeptical of this kind of claim. A building like that free falling makes absolutely no sense, no matter what type of demolition was used, because as he said, the kind of building that it is, and any kind of building, you think about it, it's a tower with 100 plus stories falling down. It's going to have to crash through all of those layers. It's not going to fall at free fall. Free fall means it's literally falling with no resistance.
Drop a lead weight beside it, and it would the building would have to collapse at that rate.
Yes, and I think it's pretty clear. I mean, it just intuitively does not make sense, at least to me, how that could ever possibly happen. Now, the other thing is, you have to remember that these buildings are extremely heavy, and there were several stories, taken out is not the right word, but severely damaged. The reason why it collapsed is because multiple stories were taken out. Well, that's a slight oversimplification of the issue, but multiple stories were heavily damaged. And so that's going to create a solid gap. And again, I'm oversimplifying things, and I'll get into this a little bit more later, but you're going to have room in terms of weakness in the structure for that weight to gain momentum as it starts coming down, to then continue to crush the lower floors.
Okay, that seems valid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but as soon as it encounters a floor that is undamaged, even if it drops 3 floors, you're immediately going to lose momentum. And every time you hit another floor, you're going to lose momentum. Only to a certain degree, but there's no way you wouldn't think there's any way that it could be near free fall speeds.
Wait, has anybody checked into whether or not a building of 100 stories might not be built, I don't know if this is the case with the towers, that 50 stories could support themselves? Do you need the support of the upper stories to keep the building intact?
My understanding of it would be that you don't need the upper stories, but you do need your floor to maintain its integrity. You do need that, and you need it to stay static. So if it has downward momentum, as in it's falling, it's collapsing, that's going to increase the stress on that floor. It's not going to hold up. It may be able to hold up, like say floor 50. It's going to hold up all the stories above it, but it's not going to hold up all of them with downward momentum.
Okay, any other thoughts on that, Sid or Doug or Kenton? Do you have any rebuttals to that? He's arguing that with 3 stories or so weakened in the upper quarter of the building, the upper quarter could gain enough momentum.
It's going to cause the rest of the building.
Is that simplifying it too much?
But
it's a bit of an oversimplification, but that's kind of my argument for the idea argument against the idea that it just simply could not have crushed the floors below it.
Okay. The reason the building collapsed the way it did was because there was something. I'm picturing like an earthquake. No, it wasn't an earthquake, but something where the foundation shook enough to where it just brought the building straight down. So, like, I'm thinking like bombs. Let's say there was bombs underneath there that blew up, and it shook the building to just bring it straight down.
That is a coherent point, I think. I have, I think, a pretty strong arguments against it. But.
So here's a scientific study. I don't know, allegedly, per the science behind the temperature of jet fuel burning in a non-pure oxygen environment, like burning in atmospheric temperatures under regular conditions, you can only reach approximately 1,000 degrees Celsius, which is well under 1,500 degrees Celsius required to melt steel. Now, steel will weaken the hotter it gets. I mean, that's kind of obvious. But the whole theory that the burning could have caused the steel to collapse is highly questionable. In
the other thing...
So one argument, and Josh maybe is going to make this for why the fire could have caused the collapse, is because due to the heat distortion of the beams, you could shear bolts and stuff.
I want to go ahead... This is getting into sort of my presentation on this. But I was going to go ahead and try to... Admittedly, I'm far from an expert on this, but I feel like I have a relatively good understanding of the facts. I was going to try to explain the design of the World Trade Center a little bit, and this may be something you guys know a little bit about as well. But to start, the main structure, the main support structure of the tower, especially at the higher levels, I don't know how it's different lower levels or higher levels. I don't remember the exact material. I believe it's steel. Steel columns all the way around the outside of the building. And then there is also core columns. So there's a bunching, there's a set of columns at the center of the building. And basically the claim is this. When the aircraft strikes the tower, it's enormous, has a ton of energy, obviously. Some portion of those columns were completely compromised. Some portion of them were still somewhat load-bearing. But I believe that the truth is that it technically was not enough to take the towers down. It could have remained standing with the amount of columns left uncompromised. Now, the issue is when the fire starts. So, obviously, jet fuel is going to get in there and it's going to burn very hot. Now, I noticed it said that a study says that this jet fuel cannot burn over 1,000 Celsius. A counterpoint to that, or just an interesting point, is that steel loses about 50% of room temperature yield strength at only 600 degrees Celsius. Now, there are estimates by, I believe, the NIST, who say that the fire inside the buildings was burning far over 600 degrees Celsius. I cannot confirm that.
Are you done for a second, Josh? Because I found a really interesting theory. So I was just reading, and I found this really interesting theory that possibly the jet fuel melted the aluminum body of the airplane. I mean, it actually definitely did that. And then the explosions you see in the videos from the floors directly below where the aircraft hit is the aluminum running down, hitting the water mains. And when you combine molten aluminum and water, it makes incredibly powerful explosions. It's known all over the place. And some people theorize that's what you see just absolutely blowing out the floors below it. Which, true, false, good or bad, I don't know.
And that is possible. I can almost agree with that.
Okay, we got into a massive argument. I think we're going to have to do another episode solely on 9/11. We are not agreeing, and we are also not being very coherent right now. So moving on to Josh and what he wants to say about different conspiracy theories.
So the main secondary conspiracy theory that I wanted to talk about a little bit was the moon landing. And I know this is just like the biggest, it's like the conspiracy theory when you think about conspiracy theories. But I think it's really, really interesting. Partially just because, from my perspective, and if you want to say that this makes me very biased, fair enough. But I think it just takes a level of sort of, if you have researched it, it takes a level of sort of rejection of information that I don't understand. Like, if that's your mindset, do your thing. But I don't understand it. But I think that when we look at it really, really carefully, there are a ton of really interesting engineering lessons and just like life lessons in general to learn from. And I think it tells you a whole lot about history. For example, I've heard a lot of commentators say that it is fair that people are confused how we landed on the moon in 1969. That is outlandish that we actually managed to do that. It's crazy. it is fair to say that it was ahead of its time. And I think that is explained by, and it points to something interesting about the situation in 1969 and really the 1960s in general. The Cold War is, raging at the time. The United States will do essentially anything in its power to overcome the Soviet Union. What better way to do that than land on the moon? In the 1960s, not 20 years after World War II has wrapped up, the United States is still in an excellent position on the world stage and demographically, domestically as well. It's relatively coherent. Obviously, there are caveats to that, but it is coherent, moderately unified, and the resources available to it, the resource domination available to it, is sort of unparalleled in history. And so when you devote an entire nation's resources, when you devote the resources of a nation that has never been matched, ever, to one particular goal, you are going to do things that are completely and outlandishly ahead of your time. I think that it's telling of the time that people are so convinced that it could not have happened.
So are you saying this did happen or it didn't happen?
It did.
I would agree.
So here's a question I have. I've heard conspiracy theorists who deny the moon landing talk about the Van Allen radiation belt, which I don't know hardly anything about, so hopefully you do. But they say that it's not possible or we don't have the technology or something to cross that without it being deadly to the humans inside the spacecraft. So what's with that?
And that is alpha radiation or gamma radiation, or what radiation is so deadly in this?
It's just high levels of radiation in general. I honestly don't know what type it is.
I mean, we're getting nuked by my Wi-Fi router, and we're okay. I mean, not super okay, but we're slightly okay.
Just gonna say the spacecraft were shielded by lead. I mean,
So
I don't know what penetrates lead very well.
there's a few things going on with the Van Allen radiation belts. So it is true they were relatively dangerous. Like, Sid made a good point when he said that there are a lot of things that produce significant radiation, even in your daily life.
And not to the extent of a massive belt of radiation.
Have you seen a cell
right?
tower?
Not necessarily to the extent that they were exposed, but basically the main point being made is that high levels of radiation exposure do not mean that you cannot pass through it.
Right.
Or that it will kill you instantly.
Certainly not.
Right.
Now, the other thing is there are different ways to get through the Van Allen radiation belts.
Lead-lined refrigerators.
There are multiple paths through the Van Allen radiation belts. So you can take paths that take you through the radiation belts in less time and in less intense radiation. And that will significantly decrease your exposure to extents that really are not significant.
Okay, the biggest thing is the lead shielding, though, I think. Lead will absorb any radiation, pretty much. Lead's pretty unforgiving.
Years ago, I was I really like space and stuff, so I studied it. I think it did happen because, to your point, Josh, they would have literally done anything to be top dog. So what better way to do it than that people were talking, countries, pretty much the whole world was talking about sending people to the moon. And am I correct in saying that Russia was working the same time as the U.S. to send somebody to the moon? I think so. Russia was working too.
Yeah, so the Soviet Union definitely did have programs in place. They were definitely trying to achieve the same goal. Mm-hmm. Now, part of the reason they never did is just because when we made it there, the race was over. I don't remember dates for certain, but it was shuttered soon after the Soviet Union's program, that is. And so it is not, extremely well known in popular culture and such, but it was a major program and they were certainly trying to achieve the same goal.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an interesting point. The Van Allen radiation belts are kind of very much down the line I was going down, which is they were willing to expose astronauts, and the astronauts were willing to be exposed to dangers that would absolutely never be allowed in today's spaceflight industry. There's the kinds of risks that were accepted on Apollo 11, and certainly the programs before that, like Mercury and Gemini and the early Apollo missions. If you proposed those missions to NASA or any spaceflight company today, you would be laughed out the door.
Which is why we see that NASA not doing anything and Elon Musk being the one sending people to space. Because he has a I don't care attitude that NASA lost after the 60s.
SpaceX would laugh you out the door if you proposed the kind of human safety regulations and restrictions that the Apollo 11 mission operated under.
I'm going to say, I was looking up, apparently Apollo 11 just bypassed the inner Van Allen belt and then just went through the weakest parts of the outer belt. So they did plan how they were going to go, and they just minimized the risk, basically, and said, we don't care.
I said it was less than a chest x-ray level of radiation. Now, it depends on your kind of radiation. The shorter rate is obviously the more dangerous.
Okay, here, I got a question for you. So, one of the main things I've seen that actually made me really doubt the moon landings was when they go to plant the flag. You've probably seen this video. They go to plant the flag on the moon, famously, and the flag waves in the breeze, it looks like. And that's why supposedly it was filmed in the deserts of Arizona or whatever.
So, I think this one is... What I'm about to say is going to sound like I'm just hand-waving and dismissing it, but what I'm going to say is physics. So, there's this fancy new concept we've recently learned about called momentum. And the truth is there's... The flag, although it's extremely light, does have mass, and it is going to move around with momentum. So they were moving the thing around. And the other thing is, interesting point, it uses an L-shaped pole. So it isn't like a flagpole on Earth where you'd have one pole going straight up and then the flag extending outside. You have the pole up going vertical and then a horizontal bar across the top of the flag. That's how it stays lofted.
Supported by a wire structure in the flag, right?
As I understand, yes. I think there was wires in the flag.
Structure.
And why was there...
Can we quick fact check that? Because I think that's true.
And why was there structure on the flag? What was the reason behind that?
Because it would fall down otherwise. There's no wind.
But there's gravity. Wouldn't it float? I mean, there's no gravity. Wouldn't it float?
There's
still
gravity.
partial gravity.
There's no air.
There is enough gravity that
There's a safety bar gravity.
there is enough gravity on the moon
that
that in
they
a
stayed
zero...
on the moon. The people didn't float off. If there's zero gravity, they would just float.
I see.
So when the astronauts are moving the flag around, like they grab the bar to move it to the position they're going to plant it, that gets the flag moving in one direction or another, and momentum tells you that it will continue to move, especially in a no air resistance to slow that down. Now the other thing is that will keep happening given the fact that it is supported, because it will react against that support. Not much, but it will be enough to show some movement in the flag.
People say, how did they get the camera angle of the guy climbing out of the lander for the first time? The other one is the biggest, most challenging part of that mission. Like, we had great missiles back then. I 100% guarantee you could have blown somebody out to the moon. The question is, how can you land them? Elon Musk has a hard time landing his rockets back on the ground reliably. And to think that they did this in 1960, that's probably the biggest question in my mind, is how did they have that technology and actually successfully do that and then relaunch them again using the same rocket?
So this is the kind of question that gets me completely fired up. Unfortunately, my thoughts are not fully coherent on it, but at least not tonight. But that gets into pretty much all of spaceflight, which I think is the coolest thing in the world. I can try to summarize it quickly. So there's one thing going on, which is simply the fact that the Earth has an atmosphere. Landing propulsively on Earth, given the atmosphere, is extremely difficult because you have to get through that atmosphere. You either have to burn your engines the entire way through the atmosphere so you don't have significant heating, or you have to have some kind of heat shielding. And that is, as we know, extremely difficult. Now, the Apollo capsule, when it returned to Earth, didn't have that issue because it did not have to land propulsively. It used parachutes to re-enter through the atmosphere. And so it was slow enough the entire time that it did have a heat shield. And obviously that helped it before it could deploy the parachutes. But, and again, this is one of those things where it was like, where the danger levels would not have been accepted in the modern spaceflight industry. But they did make it back through the atmosphere and then used parachutes. But on the moon, there's very low gravity, so you don't need a whole lot of fuel or impulse or like total force that the rocket can supply to make maneuvers and to reduce your acceleration to zero.
I have one specific thing to reply. You said if you're referencing how did they manage to land like vertically on the moon and then lift off again when Elon Musk consistently... Well, actually, he did this.
Falcon 9 literally does this. Like,
Falcon 9 does it now, but Starship just did it. Am I right?
Kind of.
Kind of did it. Here's the one simple answer. Pilots. Elon Musk doesn't have pilots landing his rockets. Back then, they literally used pilots. Interesting enough, you go look up the vehicle they used to train to land on the moon. It's hilarious looking. They crashed one. They had to eject. It's a wild video. They have it on video. It was literally just pilot training. That's all it was. Teach your dudes how to fly backwards and land that thing.
So we're arguing that people can land a rocket better than a computer can.
At that point in
When
time,
you think
yes.
about the B-2, it can't fly under human control. It has to be computer controlled.
In the 60s, the humans were the peak of
The
intelligence.
B2?
I would remind you that, as I said, it is surprisingly... So there are... Given the fact that there's no air, that actually does add an element of difficulty. But the fact that there is far reduced gravity, which requires far less thrust and impulse to control your vehicle, it becomes far easier to land that kind of craft than, say, landing propulsively on Earth. And the other thing is, again, had very low mass. It was a very small capsule on the moon. The forces at play are quite small. They're very sensitive, but they're quite small.
Okay, and then the camera angle question. That's a good explanation. How did they get the camera angle of the guy climbing out? Because it was the first time climbing out.
The camera was on the leg of the lander.
Okay. And the film was undamaged by all this radiation, apparently. I mean, this was film. And they
I know
live streamed
nothing
it?
about that.
Wait, no, they didn't live stream. They had radio transmission, supposedly? Or
They
did
had
stream
live-
it?
Mostly live.
As I understand...
How did they live stream? That's another big thing that gets brought up is how did they live stream? I mean, they didn't even have computers to speak of.
I mean, you could live stream TV back then, like news and stuff.
They had live radio, as I understand, live
Yes.
radio transcripts to mission control, which then they did often broadcast across the entire U.S. and you could listen to it on the radio. And about the radiation in the film, as I understand, there is like very low levels of radiation on the moon. It's not like the moon is made out of...
Are you talking about getting to the
Uranium.
Van
No,
Allen
this-
belts?
The sun has radiation. Well, all of that. I mean, but that would have been inside. No, so that wouldn't be an issue because it was inside the spacecraft at that time. Like the legs of the landing piece, right? Because they didn't jettison the rocket. They jettisoned the rocket with the guy in it, and two of them came down the landing capsule, and then came up and reunited, which is wild. How do you do that?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that footage was actually streamed live to Earth, and that's how we have a record of it.
Via a film camera? How do you live stream film in the 60s?
Was it a film camera?
I don't think it was.
Yes.
Did they have digital cameras?
The live video was transmitted
how
using
did they
specially
live
designed
stream
cameras.
music?
I'm just asking questions.
I don't
I'm
know
willing to
either.
believe if somebody
This
can
is-
explain to me.
this is the problem.
I thought
I don't
they had
know.
film cameras. I thought they were all
I
like
don't know
ying,
how-
ying,
I don't
ying, ying.
I recommend, this is not going on the podcast, but I recommend you all, maybe you actually should, watch Everyday Astronauts deep dive into the moon landing. There's
Can you send us a link?
a ton of like insanely interesting stuff in that video.
Is it
Okay,
on
I'm
YouTube?
actually completely wrong about radiation. That was an issue, and so Westinghouse had to design a special camera for this.
Josh, is it on YouTube?
Yeah, hold on, I'll send it to you guys.
Yeah, Everyday Astronaut's pretty cool.
Okay, no, it actually, to be completely clear, it was live streamed, including
Yes.
television data back to Earth.
Slow scan camera on the lunar module that sent signals to Earth tracking stations.
Literally only 10 frames per second.
Like, this is all highly possible. Now, the question was, did they have that in the 60s?
You understand that signals have worked the same way since God invented them.
No, but I'm saying that if they were using a film camera, how did they... Like, where was their video encode?
Okay, that's honestly looks like a very interesting video. Okay, do we think we answered you well enough?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I gotta say, this video looks very interesting. Is it called The Truth About Moon Landings?
Yeah, I just sent you the link.
2-hour video, really?
Yeah. Well, he has timestamps, so you can...
Just need to skip around and find all that. Okay,
Fine with
that was actually really interesting. I love the moon landings. I love Apollo. I love Gemini and all that. That era was peak, man. We're talking peak. We're gonna go back, man. We're gonna build that base, colonize.
So, I've got one more question for you, Josh.
I don't know.
Do you think we will ever colonize, or we will ever have somebody land on another planet besides the moon?
That's obviously a big
Yes, next
speculation,
question.
but I think so. I think we're going to land on Mars, within 20 years, I would say.
Okay.
I think it's a little bit like, I know Elon Musk wants to be there in like 10 years, but I don't. It might happen. I don't like betting against SpaceX, but it's a bold claim.
Okay, so for my conspiracy theory, I'm coming in hot with some recent evidence that may support this conspiracy theory, and that is that the CIA helped push fluoridation of drinking water as mind control. And what makes me say this? Well, first off, I don't like the CIA very well. as I think do most of us.
Hey, be nice to Josh.
But I'll stop attacking the CIA just for the sake of attacking them. So just recently, as of I believe 2023, research concluded what conspiracy theorists have been saying for like 70 years, that fluoride ingested, particularly by pregnant women, can lead to lower IQs in their children at 3 to 4 years old. Fluoride was put in the water back in the day when they started this to help with cavities, and supposedly it does. And I think there's good evidence to support that.
So we're saying because in a certain demographic it yields lower IQs, we think it was part of an experiment to see if they could like mind control people.
So kind of the beginning of why people thought this was a good idea to throw fluoride in drinking water is because the dentists noticed that in certain areas of Colorado, I believe it was, children, brown teeth, or people had brown spotting on their teeth and things, and they switched water sources, did research for years, and eventually figured out that high levels of waterborne fluoride cause discoloration. And then eventually they found out, hey, it seems to help lower cavities, maybe by 25%, maybe by more. But as recent research indicates, these levels of 1.5 milligrams or greater of fluoride per liter when ingested by pregnant women are linked to lower IQs of children 3 and 4 years old. This research just came out, kind of backs what the conspiracy theorists were saying, at least that fluoride in the water is bad, and why are we doing this? Current fluoridation levels in the U.S. are 0.7 milligrams per liter, which is about half of what the proven level that is linked to being unsafe is. And generally, if a level is proven to be unsafe, I would say that generally, like the CDC or whoever's making recommendations, probably if they have a level that they say, okay, we know this level causes issues, they don't just say, oh, half of it is acceptable. They would probably say like 10% or something. I do not have proof to back that. But as I recall, like generally the recommended dosage is way lower than the max acceptable dosage. So I'm not saying that it was the CIA or that it was put in for mind control, but it is undoubtedly bad and possibly some bad acting. There's probably some proof that maybe it was bad acting, but it's hard to find proof on the CIA. However, it's not a good thing, and why is it not removed? I mean, water's still chlorinated and fluorinated to this day in most places.
I'm curious what the motive would be of someone like the CIA. Like, what possible motive could a large power player have to lower the average IQ of a certain demographic? Other than
control.
That's fair.
So conspiracy theorists would say that fluoride will make you more controllable. It's part of their mind control thing, which the CIA hasn't been known to research.
That's true.
And it was just a widespread thing, and they managed to push it through under the guise of, being good for your teeth. Maybe it's kind of like iodized salt or something. It's just, we do it, and people don't even think about it these days.
Okay, I honestly don't have a ton to say on that one, because I think there's just no really evidence that the CIA did it, and I can't really argue with that much. It's like, yeah, it's bad for us, but it's like any other thing they do that's bad for us.
Yeah, but then why do they keep allowing it?
Does the CIA get paid to care about whether or not we have fluoride in their water?
I think it's interesting that one of the primary studies on this was actually performed by the National Toxicology Program, which is a program in the National Institute of Health, which is widely cited and arguably fairly so as one of the main actors that would be involved in any kind of deep state or conspiracy. They're not exactly well received by the public. I think it's interesting that the one solid study that Sid has been citing is released by them. Now, there is a secondary study that I have found on this that does find the same correlation between fluoride levels and diminished IQs in children. This was a much smaller study. I believe the number of subjects was something like 70. A very well-designed study at that level can be useful, but it's far from solid evidence.
I'm flexible. I don't have a lot of proof that it was the CIA. I think it's plausible that it's bad acting by somebody. Maybe it's not bad acting. It could be a boomer thing. You put something in the water to magically make everybody more healthy, and it turns out it backfires. They've done that a lot. I mean, they put lead in the paint, and they put lead in the fuel, and all that stuff, and that's clearly not good.
Asbestos.
It's good for the engine
and all that.
Yeah, asbestos for engine. There's asbestos for insulation. That is good for engines. I really wish we would have kept it around, but maybe not. I'm a mechanic some days.
And lead tastes sweet. So it's good for paint.
It's good for penguins.
It was just one of the theories I did research is like, why were the Romans supposedly like so much more brutal than anybody else, and like that link to lead, and then also how like they used lead to sweeten their wine. Okay, for the conspiracies that I want to present, first one I have is the Bohemian Club, which famously meets in the Bohemian Grove in California. It was founded in 1872 as a hangout for journalists, and as many things that are made by journalists, it was not a good thing. Basically, every year for 3 weekends, like a little over 2 weeks, some of the most prominent men, and men only, in the world go and meet there and hang out and do whatever they feel like, basically. A lot of presidents, a lot of Fed chairmen, like as in the Federal Reserve, a lot of different bankers, whatnot, all go there. A lot of presidents were part of this. Nixon was an honorary member, even though he thought it was very gay. Anyway, the main thing that's very controversial about this is that they have a ceremony called the cremation of care, in which they supposedly banish care and worry from their lives so they can just hang out for these couple of weekends. And according to them, it's, quote, to present symbolically the salvation of the trees by the club, because they're in a grove of redwood trees. It's a very beautiful area. This has only been recorded twice that I'm aware of. Alex Jones captured footage of it, and also in 2024, an unnamed person, I don't know, maybe someone will be able to find his name online, kayaked into the Bohemian Grove and captured footage of part of the ceremony. And his footage is much better quality than Alex Jones, but Alex Jones got a lot more footage and also a little bit more like of the central part of the ceremony. So basically what happens is it's very, very ritualistic, first off. Like, everybody's dressed up in robes, carrying torches to perform the ceremony, though a lot of the club members are sitting as an audience. And there's different, like, classes. There's the high priest, so-called, of the ceremony, and he's flanked by his different levels of priests or something like that. Also, some soldiers dressed up in roughly Roman-looking costumes, and everything's done, like, there's pre-written things they read out. Then this whole ceremony is carried out in front of a 40-foot statue of an owl. It's made out of concrete. It has, like, microphones embedded in it and whatnot, so it talks. It's, like, part of the ritual. Also, there's lots of pyrotechnics, lots of lighting. This is a very, very well done ritual. So basically what happens is they proclaim the death of Care, and the soldiers run out and kill Care, and then they bring this body across the lake on a boat. So they pull the boat across the lake.
What body is this?
The effigy of Care.
Is it a human or a goat?
It looks like a shrouded human figure. There's no, like, it's supposed to be an effigy of Care. That's what's supposedly happening here. And then hooded members take it off the boat, and they place it on an altar in front of this statue of the owl. The owl is supposedly one of the good spirits of the grove, and it talks to them and whatnot as part of this ritual. And then once it's on the altar, it's burned. They say Care is burned, and everybody celebrates and stands up and cheers and whatnot, and fireworks go off. That's the main part of the ritual, and the main thing that's alleged that happens here is that they're actually sacrificing people, because it looks a lot like they're sacrificing people, and it also is very occult looking. Any questions on that?
So who would they be sacrificing?
Unlucky travelers. Nobody really cares. Just if they're sacrificing people, I don't really care which people they're sacrificing. But if they're sacrificing to this, and just to be clear, the owl, supposedly a benevolent spirit, looks really sort of demonic to me. I don't know how they think the thing looks benevolent, but anyway. They also invoke past members' spirits to come and join them for the ceremony, and they invoke the spirits of the woods to help them chase away Care.
Okay.
What do you know about the beginning of this sort of gathering? I've heard a little bit about the beginning in 1942.
Well, in 1942, famously, a bunch of people, I can't remember which all the names of the scientists were, and they started the Manhattan Project there, basically. Now, that was not, as I understand, was not during, like, a regular weekend camp out with the guys. Like, this was just, they just used the club location to have this meeting, and that's sort of where the Manhattan Project got kicked off. Yeah, any other questions? I'm basically waiting on questions. I can go.
So is there are videos on YouTube about like, if we would go to YouTube and look up Bohemian Grove, we would find videos.
Yeah, you could go up. You go Bohemian Grove, or just say cremation of Care ceremony. And yes, there'll be the footage from 2024, and there'll be Alex Jones documentary. Unfortunately, the guy who was in there in 2024 who kayaked in, there's a tree blocking the actual where like they light Care on fire. You can't see that. You do see extremely well, like part of like the soldiers running out and supposedly killing Care or whatever. Also the ceremony of all the priests walking in. You see the boat coming across the lake very well, but then there's sort of like a branch blocking where the actual burning takes place.
Is it called We Snuck Into Bohemian Grove?
Just don't play it right now.
Is this international or exclusive to U.S. bigwigs?
As far as I know, it's pretty much exclusive to U.S. bigwigs.
Okay, so some of the most extreme conspiracy theorists, I believe, aimed at Bohemian Grove is used for offering children to Molech. And one thing they also claim happens there, I believe, is that they harvest adrenochrome, which is supposedly, these people would claim is great for, I don't know, helping make these people immortal. I don't know what all crazy stuff they use it for.
I'm just going to say, it does not look to me, in the best footage, in the 2024 footage, the person or effigy or whatever, the corpse, they do refer to it as a corpse in the ceremony, it appears to be adult size.
Okay.
It appears to be roughly 5 to 6 feet in length. Yeah, that's some of the footage right there.
And how did this guy not get caught? Looks like he's up in a tree.
Yeah, he appears to be on about a cliff or a ridgeline in a tree looking down in that video.
Yeah, that is creepy.
If you watch the whole video, it's like 2 or 3 hours of him like getting in there and moving around trying to he put a lot of work into getting where he was.
So my question is is he still alive?
I haven't been able to find a name for that guy.
It is, I don't know, it's under some weird...
Panzer.
That's not the original channel that published that. I'm pretty sure. I looked at who was the original, and it's just some other random channel name. And he's all masked up for the video and everything.
I'll be honest, I have very little thoughts about this. Something I don't know too much about, and it's such a loaded kind of discussion that could be taken a million different ways. I think that there's a good angle to be had that it's like many other clubs and organizations of elites that exist and are, relatively speaking, benign, not really, certainly gatherings of the elites to talk, but not necessarily occult or demonic or anything like that. And then there's also, plenty of reason to believe that it's something far more. So it's one of those things where you're going to have your opinion on it.
For me, anytime there's a secret gathering of elites, I immediately assume the worst. That's my opinion.
Yeah, you don't really have to have an opinion on this. I just think it's one of the more interesting conspiracy theories because nobody denies that the elites go hang out there and do sus stuff where no one can see them. And they also keep membership rules are completely private. Though sometimes they'll release after the fact, maybe years later, you will get a list. I'm not sure if that was just leaked to the press accidentally or if they occasionally publish them. They definitely don't want to be known as going there.
I looked up the name of that YouTube channel. Panzer Edelweiss refers to a fictional Edelweiss tank from the Valkyria Chronicles video game series and its adaptations.
Should I move on to my second one or do you have more?
Yeah,
This, I keep coming back to this Bohemian Grove. It fascinates me. If you watch, I just watched here the past 5 minutes, watched some of their what they're doing, their ceremony. It is weird. To have a bunch of these elite guys, presidents, or, elite top guys, dressing up like that and walking around carrying flames and being really weird, that is sus. I gotta say, something weird, really weird is going on.
Interestingly enough, usually right before they become something important. So, before you become president, you go there, and then you become president a couple months later, or you become Fed chairman, or whatever. So that's part of the conspiracy. I actually check to make sure that's all true. But anyway.
So, this whole thing definitely looks like idol worship. I mean, it kind of is, apparently. Yeah, pretty questionable. And these same people who go there tend to be the same people who, if you want to get into the conspiracy theory about them worshiping Molech, and this is a ceremony for Molech and stuff, these are the same people who push abortion and things. Mm-hmm. Most of them. So it's just another, tangent to the theory if you like wild theories and stuff. But Pat, am I correct? You said Trump is one of the only presidents in recent years who has not been to Bohemian Grove?
I hadn't said that yet. I need to verify that. I don't have time to verify that. Okay, Trump is not... No one can have anything to link him really to Bohemian Grove.
Moving on to your second one?
For my second conspiracy theory, I want to present about the supposed Nazi bases in Antarctica. The claim is that the Nazis established a secret base in Antarctica and possibly Hitler's remains are there. Also, then the theory goes on to say that it was destroyed by a British SAS unit or the U.S. Operation High Jump or the 3 nuclear bombs we detonated there. So this one's pretty popular. You may have seen this one online. Also, sometimes there's a supposed hole to the center of the Earth in Antarctica. Unfortunately, apparently all the evidence points to whales. All of Nazi interest in Antarctica and the southern region in general was all about whaling, as was the British interest and the American interest. And we were just testing our nukes at high altitude over Antarctica, and that's what the nuking was about. It wasn't about destroying some secretive leftover Nazi remaining holdout.
I thought we liked the Nazis. We just stole all their scientists, and then the CIA covered it up. We know that.
I can go into a little more detail about what actually went down there, but I don't know if anybody cares at this point.
Yeah, I'd like to know, because I don't have any background for it.
So basically what happened, 1938, 1939, Germany launches a research ship down to South America. They're looking basically for ways to set up whaling bases because the North Atlantic was getting picked clean of whales, and they needed more whale oil. And they got tired of buying it from what
do you use whale oil for?
Making margarine. So they sent a research vessel down there. They had like float planes on it. Honestly, really cool, flying into the island, checking out different spots. They found the one warm region of Antarctica. There's like a warm spot where a lot of bases are actually built today. Research stations are built today. They discovered that. The ship went back. They went home. They planned to build a base in Antarctica, and then the war started, and they didn't really have the time or money to do that. However, they did send commerce raiders down there, and one of them stole about 20,000 gallons of whale oil, which was supposedly one of the most valuable prizes ever taken during World War II. I didn't realize whale oil was worth that much by a commerce raider. So the Brits got very scared about the whaling industry, so they went down there and set up bases to protect the Falkland Islands and to monitor weather and whatnot, research bases. And then the U.S. Operation High Jump was, again, we weren't clearing out some sleeper cell down there. It was in 1946 and 1947. We went down there, sent thousands of troops and airplanes and hundreds of ships, maybe not hundreds of ships, maybe just dozens of ships, to basically do Arctic training and prove to the Soviets that we were willing to fight them over Antarctica if it came down to that. And then we went and established our own research stations and military bases down there. And like I said, the nukes that supposedly were dropped on the Nazi stronghold to wipe it out were actually 3 high-altitude nuclear tests that we did. So that unfortunately didn't hold water. But it was a really, endearing-looking theory when I first saw it. Unfortunately, it just didn't hold up. Anyway, any other questions, or I don't know what should we move on to next?
I just always love conspiracy theories. Is maybe not quite the technical word for these kinds of things, but the theories of, outlandish expeditions. In getting ready for this episode, I was looking into I had remembered something about the Soviet Union's expeditions to Venus. And they did send probes, but I do believe I've heard some rumors that they did more than that. And obviously this is incredibly outlandish, but it's an exciting thing to think about.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode. You can find the Nuggy Guys podcast on YouTube, Amazon Music, and Spotify. And we love to read your comments. Please leave comments. Hit us with a 5-star review if you think we deserve it. And share with a friend.
Yeah, and if your comments are funny enough, we may read them on a podcast recording. Maybe.
Yes.
Possibly.
You might get them featured and reviewed by us.
And because we all got a little bit of that tism, we like to see the lines on our charts go up and down.
Rhythm with the tism, brother.
So hit that follow button, hit the subscribe button, whatever platform you're on.
Yes, we do appreciate that to keep our tisms happy. Anyway, that's all we got. So as always, be careful out there.